morning. Thank you for spending your Wednesday evening with us. We know the Padres are playing. We know you have kids that you've had to find childcare for. So thank you so much for being here. As Dr. Forehand said, my name is Brooke Tafreshi. I want to start by giving a kudos to your school district for setting this up. We do all sorts of prevention programs and presentations, and this is the second time they've reached out to make sure that this important information gets to you all. So major kudos to Dr. Forehand, to Superintendent, and to the team. Again, my name is Brooke Tafreshi. Just a little bit about my background. I've been with our office for 16 years. Before that, I was a deputy city attorney for 2, and before that, I was a civil lawyer for a little under a year, but public service was where my heart was at, so here we are. As a community partnership prosecutor, that is a position that District Attorney Summer Steffen created when she became the elected district attorney, because she advanced our mission of our office, and that was something important that I wanted you all to know. So of course we're a prosecution agency, we fairly and ethically prosecute crime, of course we protect victims, but when she became the elected district attorney, she thought it was really important to have, there's 3 of us, deputy DAs, to go out of the courtroom and get into the community. Because what she said was she can't be everywhere, and she wants to make sure to get important crime prevention messages and to collaborate with school districts and community groups and law enforcement and all that. So it's also kudos to our district attorney to make sure that we get out there and to make sure that you as families have all of this information. And I'm really, really excited because we have our main San Diego expert, who's the chief of our Major Narcotics Division here tonight, and that's my colleague, James Fontaine. Before I introduce James, I just want to give you just a little bit about how tonight will work. So we will have James start to talk about fentanyl, give tips for parents, talk about what fentanyl is, what it looks like with San Diego, what it looks like nationally, and he'll provide lots of additional resources and information. And we also do have free naloxone here tonight that you can each take home with you. I want to make sure you know that's courtesy of Say San Diego. They are a wonderful community organization that we collaborate with, and they have provided that to make sure that we can give it to each of you. Their representative couldn't be here tonight, but we will make sure to show you all a video on how to administer naloxone. And because of that, we can't give it out at the beginning of this presentation. I know some of you may want to grab one and go watch the Padres, but we can't do that. So we'll wait at the end of this presentation and give that to you. And time permitting, after my colleague James talks to you about fentanyl, I will come back and talk to you about vapes and vaping. So let me tell you a little bit more about James, because he is amazing. James has been a deputy district attorney with our office for 24 years. 10 of those years he spent in our gang prosecution division, where he specialized in cross-border violence. James was awarded the very prestigious Prosecutor of the Year award by the San Diego Deputy District Attorneys Association, and that was for his work in the prosecution of the Los Polilos case. That was one of the longest jury trials here in San Diego County, a very impressive case, and James was one of our deputy DAs on that case and won an award for that. He is also a subject matter expert on fentanyl, and he regularly consults with NBC7, or actually they consult with him on this topic. He is on the Substance Use and Overdose Prevention Task Force, and he's also a member of a regional fentanyl working group. He regularly provides briefings to law enforcement, to trainings, to government officials, and we are very, very lucky to have him here tonight. So if you have any questions about this topic, James is the one to ask. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, James.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for being here. When I showed up maybe 15 minutes ago, and there was one person in here who'd already seen my presentation. I was a little worried, so thank you for showing up. I've got a lot to cover. I'm gonna move fast, but I want to have time to answer any questions that you might have at the end. There's a lot in illicit fentanyl, so I'm gonna go over how it's affecting us, as Brooke said, across the nation, and I'm gonna narrow it down to how it's affecting us right here in San Diego County. And I always like to start with just giving you a real powerful visual. I think it's powerful. And because what I have right here in my hand is just 3 grams of pure cane sugar. But if instead of pure cane sugar, this was 3 grams of pure fentanyl, it would be enough to kill 1,500 people. So let's talk about the impact it's having in the United States. So last year, we lost over 100,000 people in the country to a drug overdose. That could be drugs or alcohol, all different types of drugs. Methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, you name it. Over 100,000. The first time that happened was in 2021. And then it's happened every year since that. We'll see what comes of 2024, but it's a staggering number of people losing their lives to drugs and alcohol on a yearly basis in this country. The CDC broke down that number even more. And so when you look at the number of opioid deaths, and opioids, when you think opioids, it's just painkillers, right? It's your Vicodins, it's oxycodone, Oxycontin. There's a bunch of different opioids. So opioids in general, there were over 81,000 deaths last year from opioids. And then you break that down even further, and you can see that over 75,000 of those 100,000 plus deaths was fentanyl. Illicit fentanyl is really what we're talking about, not the pharmaceutical grade fentanyl, and I'll talk about that more in a little bit. But 75,000 plus people lost their lives in this country to fentanyl, or an analog of fentanyl. When you think of analog, it's just a slight molecular change in fentanyl. It might have different names, parafluorofentanyl and all these different fancy names, but they're all basically fentanyl in just a slightly different chemical formula. But that's a huge number of people that are losing their lives. You've probably heard this, and a lot of people now cite this, and it's also according to CDC numbers, but fentanyl has become the #1 killer of people between the ages of 18 and 45. And even though you've heard it, seeing this chart, I think, is really eye-opening because it also shows all the other causes of death, the lead causes of death within that age group of 18 to 45. When you think 18 to 45, that's prime of life years, right? That's when you expect you're in your prime, and you can see that the next most common cause of death is motor vehicle accidents, but that only comes maybe about half as many. So illicit fentanyl is killing more people than car accidents, cancer, COVID, heart disease, diabetes, other types of homicide, right? Firearms deaths. Nothing else comes close to illicit fentanyl. So who's dying from fentanyl? When I first started talking about illicit fentanyl, these were the two most famous people that had lost their lives to fentanyl. Prince, sometimes when I talk to students themselves, high school students nowadays, they don't know who Prince is. And I get so mad, I almost end it right there and walk out. But back in 2016, Prince lost his life to a counterfeit Vicodin pill that contained fentanyl. The gentleman on the right is an actor, Michael K. Williams. If you ever saw The Wire, it's a fantastic show. He played the character Omar, and was a terrific, talented actor, but in 2021, he succumbed to his own demons, fentanyl, cocaine, and heroin, and lost his life. Since I started talking about it, there's been a lot more celebrities that have lost their life to illicit fentanyl, and it continues to grow. And if you ever get your newsfeed from TMZ, it's like almost every other day you're learning of another famous actor or athlete that's losing their life to illicit fentanyl. Maybe you recognize some of these people. The upper left, that's a rapper by the name of Coolio. If you grew up in the 80s like me, you remember Coolio. So he lost his life to illicit fentanyl. In the upper right, the young child, that's the same person as the one on the right. I don't know if you remember that show, 8 is Enough.
Yeah.
So that's the actor who played Adam, that's Adam Rich. He played the little kid in 8 is Enough. He lost his life to illicit fentanyl. Lower left-hand corner, we still have Robert De Niro, but his grandson lost his life to illicit fentanyl. Leandro De Niro. Tom Petty, of course, huge musical artist, lost his life to illicit fentanyl. Another one that the kids do recognize is Mac Miller, also another musical artist. I show these famous people mostly to highlight the fact that you're not immune. It doesn't matter how much money you have, how much privilege you have, where you live, all the resources at your disposal, you're still at risk of succumbing to illicit fentanyl, whether intentionally, unfortunately, like the actor Michael K. Williams, not intentionally wanting to die, but intentionally wanting to consume illicit substances, or Prince, who accidentally died taking a Vicodin, and the loss, the impact of losing that type of talent. But of course, it's not just affecting them. They're the very small percentage of people losing their lives to illicit fentanyl. In San Diego County, people who are homeless, those people that we see living on the streets in tents or in our canyons or in cars, they are 118 times more likely than the general population to lose their lives to illicit fentanyl. It's the full spectrum of people that are losing their lives. I've talked about the ones at the very top, what maybe when you consider the top end of the spectrum, at least in terms of fame and resources, and then the ones at the very bottom, because they're anonymous with no resources. But it's not just them. There's in Virginia, the DEA headquarters, they actually have a wall, and it actually goes down a hallway and it turns around, and they put up the faces of fentanyl, is what they call them. And in the faces of fentanyl, under each photograph, every single person here, this is just a very small segment of a very long wall. They put up the faces and then the forever, whatever that age is. On this particular segment, there's someone as young as 15 years old. The forever 15. And when you stop for a moment and you actually look at these faces, you're not going to recognize them, but you're going to see that they are just average people. They are you. They are your neighbors. They are your kids. They are husbands and wives. They are daughters and sons. They're just regular people. And so everyone is at risk from illicit fentanyl. So it's so great that you're here. My goal and my hope is I'm going to give you a lot of information. My hope is that you're going to share it. Even though there's only a small number of us here in this room, it's being recorded, it's going to be uploaded on videos for other families who couldn't make it tonight or who enjoyed the Padres tonight. They can then watch it. But then I want you to then share that information and, most importantly, talk to your kids. And we'll talk about how you go about doing that in just a bit. Now we narrow it down even more. Let's look at the numbers in San Diego County. And what you can see, this graph starts in 2013 and then goes all the way through 2023. And this what's being shown here are the number of deaths in San Diego County that happened, the entire county, from fentanyl alone. As you can see in the early years, starting 2013, 20 through 2015, they're pretty small numbers, double-digit numbers, but still pretty small. We get a blip in 2016 at 33, and then it just continues to just this huge progression upward, where it spikes. If you look at 2016, we had 33 fentanyl deaths in the county of San Diego for the entire year. By the time we hit 2021, we broke 800 deaths, 814 deaths. That's a 2,300% increase in the number of people who have lost their lives to illicit fentanyl. It stabilized and surprisingly, it stayed exactly the same the following year in 2022. And what I view as good news, even though it's a tremendous amount of loss of life, is that we saw a decline last year and we dropped to 749.
Is this normalized for the number of people living in San Diego? Because I know there's been people moving out of San Diego, so is this normalized to the population total?
It's all this data comes from the San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office. So in that sense, yes. I mean, we have a population of 3.3 million people in the entire county. And if you died from illicit fentanyl, a drug overdose, you went through the medical examiner's office here and you were counted here. Does that answer it?
It was more just thinking about a ratio of how the population of San Diego County's changed during that time period, because I'm assuming it hasn't been flat.
Yeah, and I'm sure that it has increased, and I don't know, there's been reports of a big exodus from California. I'm sure San Diego's not immune from that exodus as well. But I don't think it's anything that would warrant, and if anything, it would increase the percentages, right, of people leaving. When we look at children who've lost their lives in San Diego, so this is, again, medical examiner data, 17 years of age or younger. What we're seeing was a spike in 2021 where 12 kids lost their life. The youngest was 12 years of age, lost their life. And this is horrible to say, in a sense, but we're lucky that that's the youngest they were, which is incredible. I follow all of the fentanyl events throughout the country to the best of my ability, and there are people in this state, but then elsewhere, that are losing babies. And we'll talk about how that is often happening. We've been fortunate that the youngest has been 12 years of age, but we've seen a decline, a significant decline in the number of children in San Diego County who are losing their life. That is good news. That is something to celebrate. A 50% decrease in 2022 brought us down to 6 kids. Still, imagine that. 6 families lost a child and will never be the same. It destroys people. And then last year, 2 kids lost their life to illicit fentanyl. So it's hard to celebrate any loss of life, but to see that number starting to come down as dramatically as it has, something is happening, and it's happening in a good way. And let's hope that this last year, I haven't seen any updates from the medical examiner, and I communicate with our chief medical examiner often. I haven't heard of any kids so far this year. And so my fingers are crossed that proves true for the balance of this year. So let's talk about why illicit fentanyl is so incredibly dangerous. To do that, I think it's helpful to talk about the difference between illicit fentanyl, the illegal stuff being sold on the street and online, versus the pharmaceutical grade fentanyl, the stuff that the doctors, licensed physicians are actually administering. If you've ever had major surgery, there's a very good chance that you were given fentanyl during the course of that surgery. Anesthesiologists will administer fentanyl, and it's a tremendously effective and helpful medication when used properly by trained physicians. It's also then, in terms of outside the hospital setting, it's often prescribed, but it's prescribed in what you might see, the one with the fingers that's holding that transparent, that's a patch, it's a fentanyl patch. And that gets just placed on the body, and then the fentanyl absorbs slowly into the skin over the course of hours. And the fentanyl is dosed in microgram dosages, so incredibly small doses that go into the skin over a long period of time. Those are normally prescribed to people in chronic pain. Late stage cancer patients are normally the ones that will get prescribed something like a fentanyl patch, or someone that just has chronic pain that is just not getting better, but it's severe. Burn victims. We have a really big burn center, UCSD Medical Center. So it's not uncommon that those patients will also get some form of fentanyl to help them deal with that. That item looks like a little stick, that's a lozenge, or like you might have heard fentanyl lollipops. Same idea. They just suck on that, microgram dosaging. The bottom one, on the bottom left, that's a sublingual spray, just spray under the tongue. That again, incredibly small dosages. They absorb slowly into the body over a long period of time. What we see in San Diego County in terms of illicit, the illegal fentanyl, is primarily in the form of those blue pills, and they'll come in other colors. I'll show you some examples. The blue pills that are on the street, often called M30s. M30s, because of the markings on the pill, an M on one side, a 30 on the other. They look exactly like generic oxycodone pills. But the ones being sold on the street and online, almost always, 99% of the time, they're counterfeit, and they contain fentanyl. And we also see tremendous amounts of fentanyl powder coming across the border and into San Diego County. The powder is just like a chunky white powder, and again, that comes in different colors too. But these are primarily what we're seeing. And we've had cases, unfortunately, come through our office where people who are experienced cocaine, recreational cocaine users, use what they think is cocaine, and it turned out it was a mistake, that the drug dealer had given them the bag of fentanyl instead of the bag of cocaine. We had one case where 4 people did lines of what they thought was cocaine, and 4 people died in that one incident. There's a liquid fentanyl up on the right, and different parts of the country are also seeing illicit liquid fentanyl. And unfortunately, that is a trend that appears to be growing. We don't see it as much in San Diego County, but we're told that that is moving. And drug trends, interestingly, they tend to start on the East Coast, and then they make their way west. And that's what's happening with some of these drugs. So when any of the medications that you get prescribed by a doctor, before they get approved for use and released to the public, they go through months and months and months of animal studies, followed by months and months and months, sometimes years of clinical human trials. And they do that to make sure that they're safe, they're effective, they do what they were designed to do. And you have, on the left side, an FDA-approved laboratory, trained actual technicians using state-of-the-art equipment. And they do that so that the medication, whatever that medication is consistent. So no matter what form it takes, whether it's a tablet that the doctor's gonna prescribe for you, or it's that patch, or it's a liquid that you're gonna, maybe an IV that you need to have done to you, that they know the exact dosage and that it's consistent through the entire medication. That's incredibly important. And it's incredibly different from what we're seeing with the illicit fentanyl. The photo on the right side is an actual photograph from a clandestine or an illegal, a hidden laboratory in the mountains of Sinaloa, Mexico. And so what we see there routinely are unskilled workers using rudimentary equipment, mixing chemicals, the exact composition of which they have no idea. They follow a spiral notebook with formulas of what they're mixing and how much to mix in. They stir it up, and then it goes to other places in Mexico where they press it into pills, where they form it into the powder I showed you, and then they move it across the border into our community. We are one of the most, some will say the busiest drug transshipment point in the United States. And we go back and forth in a competition we don't want to win with Arizona. And I showed you on the sugar packet, this is just another visual of it, but that's 2 milligrams of fentanyl, what fits on the tip of that sharpened pencil. 2 milligrams is all it takes to kill the average person, the average adult. If you're a really big guy, or maybe or a big woman, and maybe you've developed a tolerance to opiates, maybe you've been on painkillers for a while, it might take more than 2 milligrams. Maybe you're a smaller person, or heaven forbid, a child. It's certainly going to take much less than 2 milligrams. But what the DEA found in their studies, they have regional laboratories throughout the country, they found that 7 out of 10 of the counterfeit pills that contain fentanyl had more than 2 milligrams in them. That's incredibly frightening. We could talk more, I will in just a second, about why it is that those pills are so dangerous, especially when it comes to naive drug users. And they seized more than 77 million pills. This is just the DEA. It doesn't include Customs and Border. It doesn't include the local law enforcement agencies. Just the DEA alone, over 77 million fentanyl pills last year, and 12,000 pounds of fentanyl powder. So here's what I think is a really good analogy that explains why it is that this illicit fentanyl is so incredibly dangerous, even when it's pressed into a pill like this. And so imagine you have, and I promise you you're still gonna like chocolate chip cookies after I do this, but imagine you have a tray of chocolate chip cookies. No 2 cookies are gonna have the exact same number of chips, chocolate chips, in the exact same location, right? Some cookies will have 6 to 8 chocolate chips, some will have 10 to 12, some might have the chocolate chips over on one side, and so they're spread over in different places. And when they get bunched together, we call those hot spots. And now think of the chocolate chips. Instead of chocolate chips, think of them as illicit fentanyl, because that's what's happening. Remember, you have these improper mixing, this insufficient, poor mixing that's being done, both in the powder and in the pill. And so you get these hot spots in those pills and in the powder. So all of the fentanyl might be gathered up on one half of the pill, and the other half had very little or none. We've had cases come through, and this is an unfortunate reality, where some of our teens have decided that they're gonna do some drugs, but they're gonna do it safely. And so they might split a pill. And then the one teen will smoke half of a pill, the other one will wait. Hey, she's fine. That means I'm good to take this other half. And you absolutely cannot trust it. And it's absolutely Russian roulette. You never know what you're gonna get in these pills. Some pills have as little as barely any fentanyl, 0.05 milligrams. Some have 9 milligrams, more than 4 times what it would take to kill the average adult. So you just don't know where the fentanyl is gonna be. And unlike chocolate chips, you can't see the fentanyl. You can't smell it, you can't taste it. So you're not gonna know until it's too late. And okay, pop quiz time for all of you. See how good you are. What I want you to do is if you think, it's like, which one is the real one, is what I'm gonna ask. So I'm showing you Adderall right now. Which one is the real one? If you think the one on the left is legitimate, pharmaceutical grade, Adderall, raise your hand. Okay, no hands. You think the one on the right is legitimate, raise your hands. Okay, and then the real question is, would you bet your life on it? You that confident? That's really the question in the end. So, all right, not bad, impressive. Xanax. Think the one on the left is real? Raise your hand. 1 hand, 2, 3. Think the one on the right is real? Okay. Majority on the right. Would you bet your life on it? I'm hoping you all say no to that. That one's not. It's fake. Last one, OxyContin. The most prevalent of the the fentanyl, counterfeit pills that we're seeing. If you think the one on the left is real, raise your hand. The one on the right. Yeah, and that one's, we're almost split 50-50 there. Would you bet your life on it? That one's fake. They are so good. It is amazing how good they have become in replicating these pills to look exactly like legitimate medicine. And we have people think, nah, I can spot it. I can spot it. And trust me, you cannot. You cannot. From back alleys to back pockets. And this is going to sound a little weird, and maybe that's because I'm a little weird, but there used to be the good old days of drug dealing. And what I mean by the good old days of drug dealing is it used to be that if you wanted to score dope, you would have to go to a potentially dangerous part of town, potentially deal with someone that you didn't know, who might be dangerous, who might rip you off, might in fact kill you, just to take your money. And so that served as at least some form of deterrent for some people that weren't as hooked and weren't just scared. And, nah, I'm not gonna do that. It was harder back in those days to score your dope and get drugs. But now every single person, which I'm sure is many of your kids, hopefully none of the elementary school kids, but many of your kids, middle school and high school, have cell phones now. Every single one of us with a cell phone now has a drug dealer in our pocket. And this is how it works. Drug dealers have turned increasingly, there's still going to be the street sales, but more and more and more we're seeing sales online via these social media applications, Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook Messenger. And the way it happens, sometimes the drug dealers are very just in your face. They have photos of their product and they'll tell you a price on the product of what they want from it. And they'll just put spam messages and someone will buy it. Sometimes they're much more careful. They might send emojis that have certain meanings. And the young kids, they know these meanings. Even if they're not buying it, they hear it, they're up on that. And so then they get the message across that they're selling drugs. Oftentimes they will just, any type of person that will comment or like certain posts, they just send a spam to as many people as they can, hoping to get a bite. And when they do, if someone shows an interest in potentially having that communication, then they move it to a secure, encrypted communication platform, like a Signal or a Telegram or a WhatsApp. It makes it much harder for law enforcement to track those type of communications. And then from there, they make arrangements. They can deliver to the home. So you can have a child sitting on the couch next to you while you watch TV together as a family. And they can be ordering up drugs, using emojis, having it delivered in a planter right outside the house, and you won't know. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. And the way you address it is having that talk with your son or your daughter, or your grandson, or granddaughter. And it gets really hard because we want to respect the privacy of especially our teenagers, right? It's a huge deal. And for you to say, well, I want to see what your Instagram account's all about. I want to see who you're talking to. That's going to be a tough conversation, but it's got to be one that you have to have with them. And they have to know that it's coming out of a place of love and concern. and not of judgment. I'll talk a little bit more about communicating with your kids, but just know, and there's no kids in here right now, so I don't feel bad ratting them out. They're gonna have the mom and dad friendly Instagram account, and then they're gonna have the secret Instagram account. So when you say, let me see your Instagram account, they're gonna show you the one where they're saying, oh, I did all my homework last night, and I'm acing my math class, and I don't like boys, I promise. And then you're gonna have the other one that's gonna be private. And it's not necessarily because they're doing illegal things like buying drugs. Maybe because they're teens and they wanna have communications without their parents. Like, imagine yourself back as a teenager, all the things that you may have said to your friends that you would have been mortified if your parents heard you talking about. They're the same way. Now they just get to do it 24 hours a day on a phone, and they don't want you seeing it. But that's the dangerous part. That it's in those accounts where maybe they're getting contacted. So they need to know that you're concerned. You need to be able to have that conversation with them. And like I said, we'll talk about that more in a little bit. This is late breaking news. It's the first time I've added it to my presentation because it just happened on Monday. The U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York, they unsealed an indictment. And it was an indictment against 18 people. And they're charged with a whole number of federal crimes, all related to these online pharmacies. And what they found in that investigation was what looked like absolute legitimate online e-commerce pharmacies that were selling and promising that they were selling legitimate medication, which is often what like the Snapchat drug dealers will say. I swear 100% legit. I've got the receipts. I'll show you. I got the lab reports, and they lie. It's not true. Now we have these online pharmacy websites. And so there was a guy who's based out of the Dominican Republic, is the primary defendant in this case. He's working with people in New York City and what he's doing, and in India. And they have dozens and dozens of online pharmacies. And that citation at the bottom shocked me when I read it. But 5% of the 35,000 active online pharmacies, it's only 5% that comply with the United States pharmacy laws and practice standards. Shocking. So what would happen is they would set up these online pharmacies. And just to show you the sophistication and how you might even fall for it yourself, as a sophisticated, intelligent, discerning adult, they would put on these things. You can see they have different categories: ADHD medication, pain relief, sleeping pills, anxiety pills. You would click on there, and then it would show you a photo of the pill, and it would tell you what it's designed to do, and it actually gave you warnings about it. If you clicked on the oxycodone, it would tell you, be careful when using oxycodone. It could lead to addiction and overdose if not controlled. Make sure that the online pharmacy that you're buying from is a licensed online pharmacy. They would say they're FDA-approved pharmacy based in the United States. They had it on there. And it goes on and on and on. It was shocking the level of detail. They had a long privacy statement there. They had everything you would think a legitimate pharmacy. It looked legitimate. And they just had these people in India creating these online accounts, the guy from Dominican Republic coordinating all the shipments. Then they had pill mills. Pill mills, they take pills that they get from China, these pill presses, and they get the fentanyl from Mexico, the methamphetamine from Mexico. It gets to New York City, and then they press it into pills that look just like what I was showing you. And then they're distributing it to millions of people. In all 50 states, they were selling this stuff to. 9 people in the course of just under a year, 9 people have been confirmed to have died. They've been able to trace them directly to these online pharmacies, this group. So, this is one group. I'm convinced that if this just broke and this just happened, there's more. They're not alone. And we can't just say, oh, it's New York City. We're going to have to look closely at what's happening here. And so I caution you with those online pharmacies. The big takeaway, oh, here's another thing. After I read that, I'm like, well, shoot, what do I tell them? How do you know? And so this is what I found, and this is from the FDA. The FDA, it gives you these points. So there's a lot of reasons why people go to online pharmacies. One of the victims in that scam that lost their life, they actually switched to the online. They had a legitimate prescription, but because they needed Adderall, and there's a nationwide shortage of Adderall, they said, oh, I have a legitimate prescription. Let me go to a legitimate online pharmacy and order my Adderall. It was methamphetamine in the pill. They always require, legitimates always require a doctor's prescription. They're gonna have all that you can see here, a physical address, telephone number, a licensed pharmacist on staff for questions, and they're licensed by the State Board of Pharmacy. And I put a link on here, so if any of you are buying online medication, I get it, you can save a lot of money sometimes. Just check the registry. They have to be licensed pharmacies. You can put in the state and then the pharmacy number, and it'll tell you, is this a legitimate licensed pharmacy? And I see some of you taking photos. You can take photos of whatever you want here. There's nothing law enforcement sensitive. So snap away and tell me to get out of the way if I'm blocking your shot. So this is the message that I always share, is that unless it came from your doctor, came from a licensed pharmacy, assume that it's counterfeit and assume that it contains fentanyl or some other illicit, dangerous substance. That's my takeaway for tonight. If you take nothing else away from tonight, it's that. Rainbow fentanyl. Have you heard of rainbow fentanyl? You'll probably hear about it again because Halloween, it just popped up a couple years ago, right before Halloween, and there was a big scare, understandably so, that the cartels are trying to hook our kids. And they're trying to poison and kill our kids by creating this rainbow fentanyl. I personally, this is my own personal theory, knowing what I know about the cartels and knowing what I know about drug trafficking, is that was not and is not the intention. Little kids make horrible customers, right? They got no jobs, no reliable, source of funds. And what I believe this is designed for is more the young adult market. MDMA, you've probably all heard about that, ecstasy. The young adults, college age, right? They're going to these raves, these music festivals, and it's common that we're seeing ecstasy in pills, shaped into, nice, different little shapes, and coming in this exact rainbow pattern, pastel colors. It just looks non-threatening. So even on a subconscious level, it seems less threatening. I believe that what the cartel is doing is just a marketing ploy. Everyone knows now, fentanyl is so incredibly dangerous. You know what? It's just like ecstasy. I think they're trying to expand the market, make it less scary. They haven't told me that directly, but that's my theory I'm going with. On the other side, just with the gloved hand, it looks like sidewalk chalk. That's fentanyl. It's just incredibly frightening. But on these pills, the rainbow pills, even if it wasn't intended for the little ones to consume, who do you think is going to put that in their mouth if they find it? And we have too many cases. And even though the youngest in San Diego County who has died is 12 years old, that's certainly not the youngest who was overdosed. We've had cases come through our system where we've charged caregivers with a felony child endangerment time and time again, different caregivers, different children, as young as 8 months of age, just starting to crawl. And they find a pill and they put it in their mouth. And you don't have to be that young. Teens. That's what I meant about the naive drug users, the ones that don't do it. Because the experienced drug users, you'd be shocked how many people are actually seeking fentanyl. But the ones who are just experimenting, are not sure what they're doing, the teenagers who just are at a party and someone says, oh, let's take this pill, and maybe they think it's actually oxycodone. Maybe they think it's actually Adderall. They pop the whole pill. They're not cutting it up. The experienced users cut it up, they do lines, they smoke it, that kind of stuff. But it's our naive, innocent children that it's consumed the entire pill, and because there's so much fentanyl, remember, over 2 milligrams in 7 out of 10 of these things. That's why they're in such incredible danger. I want to talk to you about recognizing the signs of an overdose. And so this is important too. And it's important, like if you have, I know we're in the elementary school district, but I imagine many of you have kids that are in middle school or high school. Especially when you get to the high school level. It's not uncommon for high school kids to start going to house parties, doing things where their parents just aren't aware, not involved, maybe not there. But there have been cases where there's been a person overdosing and dying on a couch, surrounded by other people, and they had no idea that that person was dying. The signs that you would see: non-responsive to any type of physical stimulation or even verbal stimulation. So yelling, get no response. You've probably seen the medics, they do something called a sternum rub, where they take like the knuckles of their hand and they rub it right here on the sternum really hard. They do that to see if they can get a physical response from you, a pain response, because that's very uncomfortable. And they can level the sense of how conscious are you. And if you get no response, that's a sure sign that person is unconscious, and there's a good sign if we go through more of these signs of an overdose that they're experiencing just that. So the body will be incredibly limp. There's breathing, shallow breathing, irregular breathing. The investigators have come to call this exaggerated snore the death rattle. And that's because so many times witnesses have said, no, I was there and I heard him snoring, so I thought he was fine. I heard him snoring, but it's this weird exaggerated snore. And they have mistaken snoring as a sign of life when it was probably the strongest sign of impending death. And they've ignored it until it was too late. The pupils of the eyes will constrict in an opioid overdose to pinpoints. All our eyes do that when they're exposed to light. But with an opioid overdose, they constrict, and then when you take the light away, they stay constricted. That's a sure sign. Your skin can turn colors. So the tips of your fingertips, your lips, they can turn like a pale blue. If you're a darker skinned person like me, they might turn gray. But that's another sign that your body is losing oxygen. Because what opioid does is a central nervous system depressant. It slows your breathing, it lowers your heart rate, lowers your pulse, and it sends you into coma, and eventually it can kill you. So, what do you do if you are with someone you suspect is suffering from an opioid overdose? You certainly call 911. The 911 operators are trained to guide you through your next steps. If you have naloxone, and I hope you all take 2 boxes at least each tonight. I brought a lot. And thank you, Say San Diego, for contributing that to you tonight. But there's a lot here. You administer naloxone, and I'm going to show you a video here in just a second of how you do that. Perform CPR. You can do chest compressions. If you're trained in CPR, do chest compressions. But what they really need is oxygen. And you need to decide, are you willing to give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation? That's going to be the best thing. Maybe you don't have Narcan. Maybe you don't have enough Narcan. And we can talk about that maybe. But this is also, the Good Samaritan law is important to point out. There's a lot of people who are afraid to call 911 because maybe they're in that party scene. Maybe they're high themselves. Maybe they have a small amount of drugs on them. Maybe they have paraphernalia. And they're afraid if I call 911, the medics are going to come, but of course the cops are going to come. And I'm going to get in trouble. So they don't call, or they delay in calling. And that causes essential loss of life. So the Good Samaritan law is designed to encourage people to call because it insulates them. They are absolutely, they cannot be arrested. We cannot prosecute them. No criminal charges. If you call in good faith, 911, to get help for someone that you believe is suffering from an overdose, and you're high, you have drugs on you, you have paraphernalia, you're immunized. You will not be arrested or charged with any type of crime. That's important to know. Not that we're saying it's okay to be high and all that, but we value the life so much more. We would rather say we want you to call 911 than to bust you for any type of offense like that. Let me play this video for you. This is the video that you need to watch, and then...
This video will show you how to give naloxone in an overdose situation. If someone will wake up and you suspect an overdose, call 911 immediately and provide the address of your emergency.
Hello? Hi, I need somebody to stop breathing and I think you overdosed.
Now it's time to administer naloxone. Remove the medicine from its packaging. Tilt the person's head back and provide support under the neck with your hand. Hold the nasal spray with your thumb on the plunger. Gently insert the tip of the nozzle into either nostril. Press the plunger firmly to release the dose. Empty the entire container, then remove the nasal spray. Roll the person on their side. If possible, place their hands under their head and bend their upper leg forward. This is the recovery position. It keeps the person from rolling onto their stomach so they won't choke in case they vomit. Watch for signs of breathing. If the person is still not waking up, provide rescue breathing or CPR. Place the person on their back. Tilt their chin up and open the airway. Pinch their nose with one hand and give 2 breaths. Repeat. Give 1 breath every 5 seconds. Give chest compressions. If they regain consciousness, be aware that some patients might wake up disoriented or agitated. Give them space. If they don't respond or wake up within 2 or 3 minutes, give additional doses of naloxone, switching between nostrils. It's safe to administer as much naloxone as necessary. If opioids are not involved with the overdose, naloxone will not cause any harm. Each nasal spray pump is for one use only. Stay with the person until help arrives. Naloxone is not a substitute for medical care. The effects of naloxone are temporary and last only 30 minutes. There's still a danger of overdosing once the medication wears off. This is why it's important you stay with the person until they go to the hospital. Recognizing the signs of an overdose is as easy as ABC. A. Awareness. A person experiencing an overdose will have difficulty walking and talking. They look dazed, drowsy, confused, or unconscious. B. Breathing. Breathing is slow or absent. They're choking, snoring, or making gurgling sounds. C. Color. Opioids can deprive your body of oxygen. Their skin feels cold or clammy. Their lips, skin, or fingertips are pale, ashen, purple, or blue. Once you recognize the signs of an opioid overdose, it's time to act. Never hesitate. California law protects a person who is overdosing or the person helping from legal trouble. If you or someone you know is struggling with an opioid addiction or is in treatment, you can get free naloxone, no questions asked. Visit our website for a sheriff station, substation, or public health clinic near you. There are several factors that can increase a person's risk of overdosing. Taking too many painkillers, mixing painkillers with alcohol or other drugs, taking illegal or street drugs laced with dangerous substances, a change in your tolerance level. Preventing overdose deaths starts with all of us. For more information on prevention and treatment programs, call the National Crisis Hotline at 988. You can also call 211 San Diego by dialing 211 or the County Crisis Hotline at 888-724-7240. These resources are confidential and available 24 hours per day. Remember, this spray can save a life.
So in addition to tonight, where you get your Narcan for free, I wanted to put up some different resources where you can find it throughout the county. There's different regional public health centers where you can go and you can get Narcan. And there are a number of other agencies that work throughout the county that can also provide you free Narcan. It is being sold over the counter, but I think it's, $40-something? It's not cheap. So while it's still available, California has a naloxone distribution program. Naloxone is the actual drug name, Narcan is the trade name. But we have all these availabilities to get it for free and distribute it for free. I am convinced that that is one of the primary reasons we're starting to see the drop in overdose deaths, is that we have so much naloxone out there in the community. So that's a great thing. And for those of you who think, well, I don't need it. I don't need it. My family is fine. They're never going to do anything like an opioid. Well, if you have older adults in the home, too often you have people that forget they're on pain medicine. Maybe you have someone that has some memory problems, an older parent, grandparent, and they've taken their opioid medication that day, and they forget and they take it again. They can suffer an overdose. Naloxone would work on those pain medications as well. And it's one of those things where you hope you never have to need it. But having it, just that opportunity, if maybe someone, you see a complete stranger and you happen to have it, you can save somebody's life. So I recommend you take it. Of course, there's no obligation to take any tonight, but I strongly encourage that you do that. And again, thanks to Save San Diego for tonight's contribution of naloxone. What can you do? I think this is a really important part. These are things that I've learned now in my years as the chief of Major Narcotics and talking to parents. And too often I'm talking to families who have lost their son or daughter or loved one to illicit fentanyl. And it's almost always fentanyl or methamphetamine or a combination of the two. But one big important message, the first one, never assume that this cannot happen to you. That would be the biggest mistake. And think back to that Faces of Fentanyl photo I showed you. They're normal people. And the young people that I have seen that have lost their lives, so many. We think, oh, we know who it's going to be, right? It's the kid in the back of the class, maybe it's non-social, has an attitude, and you think you can pick that kid out, and maybe that kid is struggling or experimenting with drugs, maybe not, but maybe. But you would be amazed how many of the kids we have seen and unfortunately have lost their lives are AP students, they're honor students, they're star athletes, they are popular, they are respected, they are loved. Their parents love them, their friends love them, they are loving people. And yet they made a decision, a bad decision, that took them down a path where they either experimented or they were trying to escape whatever they were suffering with. And we are living in the age of anxiety. And so many kids are suffering and they think, look, maybe I have undiagnosed anxiety. I know Xanax, I heard that's supposed to help you with your anxiety, but I don't really want to go see a doctor. I don't want to tell my parents, you know what, my friend is getting medication. Well, I can just order it right here. I saw a guy on Snapchat, he says it's real, and they're ordering it online. And that's where the danger comes. But never assume it can't happen to you. Huge takeaway. Number 2 is talk early and talk often with your kids. And this talking to your kids, of course, it has to be age appropriate. If you're talking about the elementary school kids, you're not really showing them pictures of fentanyl and talking about people chopping them up and doing lines. That's not the conversation. I was fortunately put in charge by Summer Stephan, the DA, put in charge of a working group, and I worked together with the San Diego County Office of Education, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and we enlisted the help of these prevention specialists based out of Washington, D.C. What school drug prevention curriculum actually work based on years of randomized control studies that show a change in behavior, reduction in the onset of use of drugs, and the reduction in corresponding overdoses. What works? And we were able to identify a number of these curriculum. But when we talk about the young kids, what we found, what works, are building those softer skills that you need to develop, and that's when the teachers come through. It's the parents and the teachers and maybe the older siblings, and those skills are emotional self-regulation, it's self-confidence, it's communication, it's knowing refusal skills. But these are skills that are hard to measure and take a long time to develop, but they are critical, and we start young. That is going to help them in all aspects of their life, but it absolutely helps them avoid starting using illicit substances. That's the elementary school age. Making good decisions. Don't take any pills. Only mommy or daddy gives you medicine. You don't take it from friends. You don't take it from neighbors unless I'm there and I tell you. That's the type of conversation with elementary. When you start getting to middle school, they start to experiment. And middle schoolers today are probably a lot more advanced than you probably think. Maybe not. Maybe you know. Maybe you have middle schoolers and you know just how much that they actually know. Sometimes a lot more than we do, or at least they think they do. Maybe you start getting a little bit more specific as to the dangers of fentanyl. And then it becomes a conversation that is not one, it's certainly not a lecture. It's not me then talking to them about fentanyl. It's you asking them about their friends, asking them about what their days are like, asking them what they know about drugs. What's happening with drugs in your school? Do you know people that are using it? What do you think about that? And so that they know that you're coming from a place of concern and of love to protect them. Not of judgment and not to bust them. You're gonna have to swallow this. If they admit something to you, you gotta be ready to just be grateful that they're opening up to you and you get to know the truth, because if you come down too hard, they will shut down and they'll never talk to you again. It's a tough thing. It's hard, it's even hard me telling you how to parent. I'm not trying to tell you how to parent. I'm telling you that these are things or skills you need to think about how you're gonna communicate with your kids. Formulating an escape plan is huge, and what I mean by an escape plan is your kids, when they start to get older, that middle school, high school age, they're going to be in a situation, a social situation, where they're going to feel tremendous amounts of peer pressure. And I was thinking earlier today, it's so easy as an adult to think, God, these dumb kids. I can't believe they would just, someone told them to do it and they did it. But then I was thinking back to things in high school that I did. I'm like, oh, that was total peer pressure that I caved to. And I think, man, I could have been one of those kids that would have taken the pill. I absolutely could have. So now that you're going to talk to them about drugs, and they're going to learn, especially in the high school age, just how, that's when you can talk to them about fentanyl specifically, and how it's killing people, and how it's in counterfeit medication. Now, they absolutely cannot take it from anyone except their doctor from a pharmacy that came directly to them. No friends sharing and being good friends, none of that. The risk is way too high. But an escape plan is that you find the kid in a social situation, a party, let's say, and there's a lot of pressure, peer pressure. In advance, you want to have made some sort of plan where if your son or daughter sends you a text message, let's say, says, hey, mom and dad, Sally wants to know if I can spend the night. That's your clue. You know if that text message that you've already identified comes through, that means I'm not feeling comfortable right now. I need you to come pick me up. And it doesn't have to be you. It could be a trusted older sibling, maybe it's a neighbor, someone that they know and that they trust. And when you get the message, it's no questions asked. You know what? No, you can't spend the night. In fact, something's come up. I need to come get you right now. I'm sorry. And then he says, look, my mom's coming. I can't do anything right now. My mom's coming, pick me up. I gotta go. That's this. And it sounds like, oh, that's really easy. But the thing is, in the moment, at a party, unless they've thought this through and unless you have a plan, it's so hard to come up with that. So do that. Make an escape plan with your kids, if at the right age, right? If you have those kids. And then the last one, of course, having a naloxone at home. There are a couple really, really good websites that go in much more detail, give examples of questions, dialogue, things you can ask. If you have any questions about that, I encourage you to check it out. The Substance Use and Overdose Prevention, I'm almost done, so you can tell. Substance Use and Overdose Prevention Task Force. It's a phenomenal resource, countywide resource, and they go to the webpage, and you're gonna find all kinds of toolkits for parents, for educators, you name it, and it has a section in there about talking to your kids. Another one was Partnership to End Addiction. Phenomenal website. And again, all kinds of stuff, including not just how to talk to your kids, but then what if you have someone that is struggling? And we haven't talked about that. But if you have someone that's already struggling with substance abuse, there's a lot of resources you can get for treatment referrals to help your son or daughter deal with whatever they're struggling with. I think this is an incredibly important message too. There's the California Healthy Kids Survey every 2 years. They do a survey, it's anonymous, and they do surveys with 7th graders, 9th graders, 11th graders. It includes all the public schools, it includes continuation schools or those non-traditional schools. And what's important about this message is that people like me get up and we talk about the dangers of fentanyl, and the big mistake would be if you walked out going, oh my God, everyone is doing fentanyl. When the reality is they're not, especially among our children. It is the very small percentage of children that are actually experimenting or being exposed to fentanyl. And these numbers show it. So overall in San Diego County, 14.25% of kids had reported they had used drugs or alcohol within the prior 30 days. That means 85% have not. And then it breaks down over the grade levels, and not surprisingly, it's very low at the lower grade levels and gets a little bit higher as you go down. Because the message I don't want is that, hey, everyone's doing it, especially when I talk to kids. Because then they think, well, shoot, if everyone's doing it, it can't be that dangerous. I might as well try it. It's not as dangerous as that guy in the suit up there is saying it is. So the reality is that's not the norm. Most kids are not doing it. Important fact. These numbers, you know, real quick, 911, we all know what that is, emergency. But I do that because I have just 3 numbers that you need to remember. 911 if you're in an emergency, obviously. 988, that's the access and crisis line. You call that number, and if you're in crisis, used to be suicide line. It's suicide and other like mental health crisis, and even substance use crisis. So you call 988 24/7. They have trained clinicians there that can talk to you. And maybe you're not going through crisis right at the moment. Maybe you just have a situation at hand where you have a loved one that you think is going to die because they're using fentanyl. You don't know what to do. You don't know your next steps. You call 988. Talk to that clinician. They're going to guide you through, these are your options. These are some things to consider. So you don't have to be in immediate crisis. Do not hesitate if you need help. The other one is 211. That was in the sheriff's video as well. There, if you want to get more naloxone or you want more, where are there treatment facilities available in the county of San Diego? Call 211 and they'll tell you and can help you find those places. Hope moving forward. I love ending with some hope. So what I'm showing here was the trajectory of the fentanyl deaths. It was the increases in deaths year to year. And so from 2019 to 2020, we saw a 200% increase, roughly 200% increase in overdose deaths. 2020 to 2021, we still saw an increase, but it slowed to about 77%. And then 2021 to 2022, that's where it leveled off. Remember, it was 814. Last year, we saw about an 8% decrease. So we saw that increase slow down, stop, and now start dropping. This is good news, and I hope it just continues. This is even better news. Under the age of 18, between 2021 and 2023, we saw an 87% decrease in the county of San Diego of kids who have lost their life to a drug overdose. That is huge. Surprisingly and unexpectedly, even when you go to the 18 to 24-year-olds in San Diego County, we saw a 35% decrease. That's significant in the number of deaths from 18 to 24 years of age for any type of drug or alcohol overdose. That's huge, and that's something worth celebrating. That's all I've got. That's my time. And if you want to follow us on social media, I invite you to. Do we have time to?
We have time for questions because
Okay.
we have plenty of time for questions.
Great. Any questions? Yes.
I'm just trying to figure out what's the reason for the increase in the fentanyl. Like, are people like they want it, or it's just like I don't really understand what the reason is for all of this fentanyl. Like, I don't think people are like out on the street saying I need fentanyl, right? Like in the beginning, or they're putting it in. I heard like you're saying like it's being added to all those other drugs. So is it like an accidental people getting addicted to it, or they're actually
It's a combination of the two. Okay. And so if we go back to we talk about the opioid crisis just in general, right? That really started, there's like different waves of the opioid crisis. And think of it, there's 4 waves in the set. We're by the coast, and if you're surfers at all, let's say you have a 4-wave set coming through. The first wave that came through was the overprescription of legitimate medication. That happened in the 1990s. You think of Purdue Pharma, you've probably all heard about them, but those are actual medication. That was resulting in a huge number of deaths. And they did that because the sales reps for companies like Purdue Pharma, and there are a bunch of other ones, companies like Purdue Pharma, were telling the medical doctors, this stuff is not addictive, it's safe. And medical doctors bought off on it, they started prescribing it, and it just got distributed to tens of millions of people that eventually developed dependencies and addiction to legitimate oxycodone. By the time we hit roughly 2010, medical community had gotten wise to it, the federal agencies had gotten wise to it, and they clamped down on overprescribing of pain medicine. But now you had millions and millions of people hooked, dependent on painkillers that they could no longer get from their doctors because they wouldn't prescribe them anymore. So they turned to the black market. And the black market at first was heroin. That's the second phase of the opioid addiction. So then now you have a lot of people that need to fulfill that addiction that are going to heroin on the street. Slowly, and well, not so slowly, the drug cartels decided they're going to add fentanyl to the heroin to make it even more powerful, because fentanyl is actually 50 times stronger than the heroin itself. And they wanted people to buy their heroin. And pretty soon, it wasn't just the adulteration of heroin, it just became fentanyl. Soon they just said, we don't even need heroin. The amount of heroin coming from Mexico now is minuscule compared to the amount of fentanyl. And so another reason is fentanyl it's synthetic. It's all made in a laboratory. With heroin, it's a plant-based product. They say roughly it's like 4 months from plant to product. You need growing seasons, large plots of land. You're at risk because aerial surveillance can see your plots. That can eradicate government eradication programs. A lot of labor to get to harvest all that opium and convert it into something the heroin. Fentanyl, you just add some chemicals that you can readily get from China, and you can do it in an apartment, and you're putting out enough fentanyl much cheaper than heroin. So there's some drug users that used heroin that are saying, I wish I could find heroin, and they can't even do it. So it's not even available anymore. So it's cheaper, increased huge profits for the cartels, and then that's what people, even now, so it started with that was phase 2 was heroin, phase 3 becomes the fentanyl in 2013 roughly. And then now, since at least 2017, it's polysubstance use. It's fentanyl plus methamphetamine mostly. that we're seeing. And we have people that are still getting hurt and getting the prescription going that route and then getting hooked and then turning to the black market. But you'd be surprised how many people are now just simply seeking fentanyl itself. So I hope that answered your question. Any other questions?
Just a comment more than anything else, but thanks, this was really, really informative. On the storage of Narcan, I think there is a temperature range,
Yeah, there is.
right?
Yeah,
That's
you
what
shouldn't
it
freeze
does.
it.
Right.
It's supposed to be stored below 77 degrees.
So not in the car.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, our cops roll around with it in their car.
Okay.
It's not refrigerated. And so the heat might degrade some of the potency over a period of time, but rather to have it than not have it. Same with the expiration date.
Yeah.
It'll expire, but like most medications, they'll still be effective even for a long period of time after the expiration date.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you for your attention. I went over a little bit. Thank you, Brooke, and thanks again for hosting me and allowing me to talk to you. I hope you did find it informative. If you have more questions, I think my contact information is up there.
I will send them your, yeah.
Perfect.
Actually.
Reach out if you have questions, or if you have other organizations that you're affiliated with or other groups and you want to have something similar and you think they might benefit from something similar, you can reach out to Brooke, you can reach out to me directly, we can set something up for you. But thanks again for your time.